Welcome to today's student-led interview with school board member Karitsa Mosley Jones. My name is Susan Eckelman-Burgle. I'm an associate professor here at UTC, and I also direct the Africana Studies program. Today's interview is the second of a three-part series with prominent community members and our students. If you're available and interested, please join the next interview with Executive Director and co-founder Shane Morrow with RISE. And for more information, feel free to contact me via email, susan-eckelman@utc.edu. This collaboration emerged as part of an effort to introduce students to local issues and Chattanooga's rich history. Students' questions today are informed by the readings and discussions we've had in a course that I currently teach on the origins of racist ideas from the 15th century in Europe to present day in the United States. So we capture quite a big portion of history here. I want to extend special thanks to RISE, of course, for collaborating with UTC History Department and Africana Studies on this unique opportunity. And especially Ms. Mosley Jones for making time. I know it's a busy time for you, and her willingness to share her insights and experiences with our audience and UTC students today. And I want to thank my students for participating as well and leading this conversation today. A quick note about the format of this community-led conversation. The students will lead the discussion, but participants and attendees are welcome to post questions in the chat, and there will also be some time at the end. And we'll take a little intermission here about halfway through the interview where we're gonna make some additional announcements and folks can chime in to ask some questions as well. And that's a bit in terms of the format. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the chat. And on that score, I'll hand over the mic to Widzen, who joins us from RISE today.
Hello, everyone. I've met several of you, many of you before, but again, my name is Woodson Carpenter. I'm the community arts strategist for RISE Chattanooga, which on a daily basis means I get to do a lot of great stuff. One of those things being working with the wonderful school board member, Karitsa Mosley, who you see here, who we're gonna be talking to today. And one of the ways we interact is she has a podcast with us on our podcast network called Pearls of Blackness, where she talks about kind of everyday things and the wisdom that we can glean from sort of these normal life lessons and experiences that we have. But in addition to that, as you know, she's a school board member, a social worker, very highly intelligent and passionate about her community and the areas that she works in. So I won't again get into too much detail. We're excited to have this partnership with the history department. We're excited to be present with you all. We think of this as such a really interesting and important source of community building for us to be able to come together and have these conversations, sometimes about difficult things, but important conversations so that we have a better understanding of our neighbors, of our community, and the struggles and the victories that different folks have. So that being said, I don't want to spend too much time here so we can get these questions out of the way. Karitsa, thank you again for joining us, and Susan, thank you for the introductions and the organization.
Yes, thank you. And without further ado, it's time for the students to chime into the conversation. The dialogue today is structured around different thematic issues. Ms. Mosley Jones's growing up experiences in Chattanooga, her career decisions, political ideas and visions, and more contemporary issues, race and education, and the impact of COVID on her work. And the first questions the students would like to raise concern her growing up experiences in Chattanooga.
Hello, I'm Justin Turner. I'm a communications major with a minor in history. And the question I had was, you had mentioned that you had, or we had learned that you had been raised what you call the village style. Could you elaborate and like explain to us what you mean by that?
Yes, I can. So I do attribute everything that I am, my foundation, to the village that I say raised me. Of course, I have biological parents, and I feel like they're the best parents in the world, but who doesn't feel that way, right? So I have a amazing mother, and she's different. Mama has her own way of doing things, and then I had the best father in the world, I believe, and my dad passed away in 2019. And from them, of course, I had biological aunts and uncles and grandparents. And then as it stemmed from there, I have all these aunts and uncles and cousins and people that I feel like are family to me that are not necessarily biologically related to me, but were elders and inspirations to me in my growing up. And so I grew up in an atypical household. So I grew up in a single parent household, just my mom and myself. But of course, my father was always involved in my life. And then I had a stepmother. I have older siblings. I'm the baby of 5, and I'm the only child on my mom's side. So even my older siblings were like, I call them some of my village leaders, additional dads and mothers in my life. But everyone that I was exposed to, my mom worked, my dad worked, he was a police officer, my mom worked at Sam's Club. And so they worked an array of shifts. And so I spent time in a lot of households, grandparents, neighbors, church members, my aunt, her sorority sisters. She was a teacher. My dad's sister was a teacher. So she had lots of teacher friends that helped pour into me, would keep me after school, mentor me, tutor me, so forth and so on. So I just had a lot of people that poured into me. And because of my experiences, I believe that I am, with them, I should say, I believe that I am who I am today because of that. And they exposed me to a lot of things. So I went on vacations with friends' families. I spent time in friends' homes. So a lot of my friends, their parents were part of my village, and they helped raise me as well. And I would behave and respond to them the same way I would my biological parents. I have a lot of respect for them. And every elder in my life that has that's helped raise me. And when I say elder, that doesn't always mean somebody that was older than me in that aspect, like years and years older than me. But anybody that, I mean, you could have been 5 years older than me, but I feel like I've learned something from them, even like my cousin who helped keep me when I was young, that sort of thing. So I believe that's really important, that you glean wisdom and knowledge and intelligence from not only your experiences with those individuals, but the things that they pour into you and share in your upbringing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
And to follow up on that previous question, could you speak of the challenges of growing up in a single parent household in Chattanooga?
Yeah, so being on the school board now, I look at a lot of the challenges that the children that I represent face, right? And a lot of things that they're exposed to as children that I just was not exposed to as a child, right? And so I did tell you all that I was raised by a single mother. She worked full-time hours. Sometimes she worked second shift, so like 2 to 10, 3 to 11. Sometimes she worked 12 to 8. Sometimes she worked 7 to 3. It wasn't probably until my 9th grade year of high school that my mom worked. She worked a really crazy shift. It was like a 5 to 1, a 4 to 12 kind of shift, so that she could be able to be at a lot of my events as I entered into high school. Now, granted, she did that in the other shifts as well. She just took time away from her job, or took off days, or took her lunches, or that sort of thing. But I say all that to say that there were times when I probably benefited from, I'm gonna say this, I know that we received government assistance for things, but I never knew that. Like, I never knew that. Like, I just knew that I ate every day. I knew that I had a roof over my head. And I knew that my mom provided for me in whatever way she needed to do, because she still got up and went to work. So I never really knew that. But that's a challenge. I mean, because you think about it, she allowed me my innocence as a kid. And I feel like a lot of times children these days don't get that. They know everything that their parents, every struggle their parent had. I didn't know that. Also, I will say this, a challenge when I look back on it, and I guess it was a challenge for me. I don't know. But I think about, my mom worked a lot. So I talked about a few minutes ago in my village how I would go out of town or on trips and things with like my friends and their families, or my aunts and uncles and their families, because my mama worked. Like, she was working to provide for me. And so she couldn't take me on summer vacations because she was working, right? So I had to do that with other families. And so when you look back on that, did I miss out on those things with my mom? Yeah, I did. But she worked and provided me the experience all the same. And so I think about those things. Oftentimes people will say that when you're raised by a single parent that there's a challenge of not having the other parent in the home. Well, my dad never lived with us, but he never missed a beat. So I can't say that was a challenge for me, because he was always present. He was a present father in my experiences. And so I wouldn't say that for me, growing up in a single parent household had a lot of challenges, but I'm pretty sure they did. Just as my parents, I didn't know that. I didn't know that there were challenges oftentimes. Other than, like I said, when I look back on certain things and I realized, that when we were going certain places, we were going to the Section 8 office. I never knew that though, as a kid. I mean, I just knew my mama was going to fill out an application. But I think about those things in hindsight and say, wow, well, I guess I never really thought about that as a hardship. To me, it was more of a provision. So I didn't have a lot of tremendous amount of challenges growing up in a single parent household, simply because my mom didn't expose me to adult things at that time.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to hear about your father.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit to your older ages, we read that you went to the University of Alabama. So I'm kind of curious, as a person of color, how was your experience growing up in a state that has such, kind of complication backgrounds with us?
Right. So I did not attend the University of Alabama. I do not roll with the tide. I did not. I am a graduate, a very proud graduate of Alabama A&M University, which stands for Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical University, which is actually a historically Black college and university. Doesn't mean that we didn't have experiences being Black students in the state of Alabama, because Alabama is Alabama, just like the South is the South, right? But my experience at Alabama A&M afforded me, I think, an experience in a state that's not historically known for its race relations, and an experience that was amazing as a Black, an African-American student or a Black woman in college at that time. So attending an HBCU in the state of Alabama was different, but it was pride. It gave us a sense of pride. Alabama A&M is a very distinguished university, known across the country for the work that it does, especially in the agricultural and mechanical fields of study. It's a land-grant university founded in 1875 by a former ex-slave. Like, he went back and bought the land that he had been auctioned off on, right? And so there's rich history there, and we talk about that all the time. It's in our alma mater, Rich in Heritage Divine. We talk about Council, which is William Council. He was our founder. But there was a sense of pride, and I learned a lot about my culture attending an HBCU. Having attended a magnet school here in Chattanooga. I'm a proud graduate, 1999 graduate of Chattanooga School for the Arts and Sciences. During my matriculation there, we were a very diverse school, a melting pot. I went to school with all races, creeds, and colors, all kinds of people, all kinds of ideas and opinions. And so I had that experience from 2nd grade to 12th grade, and it was an amazing experience. And I have relationships with most of pretty much everybody I went to school with, and even my teachers and administrators today. So switching that and going to a historically Black college where it was predominantly African-American students was an experience in itself, right? Because I had just left a school where it looked like the world, and now I'm coming into a school where everybody looked like me. But I'm thankful for that experience, because it did give me an awakening in my culture, and educated me on things that helped to make me the woman that I am today, and the proud African-American educated African-American woman that I am today. And I know that for me, because of my experience at both institutions, but especially at Alabama A&M, that we talk about glass ceilings all the time, but for me, there's no glass ceiling. It's just a ceiling I'm getting ready to break, because that's the type of education that I received going to a historically Black college. Like, I don't see that as an obstacle or something that I can't do. I just see it as a bigger challenge, and it drives you all the more, and drives all the passion in me to continue to get to those ceilings and those levels of elevation, and break those ceilings and exceed the levels of elevation that people have put before me as an African-American woman. And that is what I learned there in Huntsville, because that's what, like most Black people in the state of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, which we're striving to do every day, even in 2021, because we still are in the South, and we know what that looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And my apologies on misstating the wrong school.
Oh, you're okay. You're fine.
Hey there, I'm Catherine Wilson, and my major is secondary education and history, and I'm from Stockbridge, Georgia. My question to you is, did your childhood experiences persuade your decision to pursue a degree or a career in social work?
So, to be honest, no. When I went to college, I actually wanted to, initially, I wanted to be an FBI agent. And then I was going to pivot over to law. And then I was afraid to take the LSAT after all that preparation. And I decided to take my passion still the same, because my bachelor's is in sociology and criminal justice. I decided to take my passions all the same and kind of work them for my greater good. And talking to one of my professors, my advisor at that time, Dr. Rocher in the Department of Social Work, he asked me, had I ever thought about social work, because of my interest and my participation in certain things on A&M's campus. He felt like I had a passion for helping people. And so he asked me, had I ever considered social work? And I was like, no, I ain't trying to be a social worker. Because for me, I always thought social work was like DCS, CPS, DHS. And I didn't want to do any of those things, right? I wasn't trying to snatch kids, for lack of better terms, but I wasn't trying to remove children from homes or deal with child abuse and neglect. I wasn't trying to do those kinds of things. And so I was like, I don't really know about that, Dr. Rocher. And he really encouraged me to apply to the graduate social work program there. And so I did. And of course, I was accepted. I received a master's in social work in 2005. I always tell people that social work chose me. I did not choose social work. I do believe it is my purpose and my passion. And throughout my almost 16 years in the field of social work, I've been able to pivot several times, still using my social work experience and background to do what I needed to do. In hindsight, when I look back on certain experiences that I did have as a child, I guess you could say that it helped to shape me to be the person that I am and have the passion for people the way that I do. And once again, that came from my examples in my village. That came from my experience at CSAS. They instilled in us public service and community service early on. We always were doing those kinds of things in elementary, middle, and high school. I mean, that was part of our requirements to graduate from high school. We had to do community service hours. And so I've always been one to give back. I come from a family that does that, gives back and pays forward. And so, and advocating and advocacy. So for me, it just kind of all of those things just kind of came into to fold in the field of social work. So I guess I didn't aspire to be a social worker, but looking back on my my life, there were experiences that probably helped me in pursuing and continuing in the career of social work.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your family history and what motivated you, the trajectory of how you came to social work. Really appreciate you sharing with us those insights. The students have some questions about your career too, and where you draw your inspiration or how you serve as inspiration to others. So the students now will chime in with some questions about that.
Yes, hello, I'm Mary Comperry. I'm from Clarksville, Tennessee, and I'm a secondary education history major. And my question for you today is, as both a student and as a future educator, what are ways I can get involved and volunteer my time in urban schools to help K through 12 students that might need mentorship and or a tutor?
I'm going to tell you, one is as simple as just reaching out to a school that you may have an interest in, or reaching out to, here in Hamilton County, we have what we call learning communities. And so we have directors in the learning communities, and schools are kind of broken into clusters in that aspect. So if there's a certain neighborhood or population of children that you like to service, you could always reach out to your learning community director. You can always reach out to me or the school board, and any one of your school board members that are listed. Our information is public record on the Hamilton County Schools website, as well as the Hamilton County Election Commission. So you can always reach one of us. And if after this call today, if there's a specific school or interest that you'd like to do, I don't mind to connect you to that population. But I would tell you all, it's as simple as one, it's just contacting the administrator of a school. Every school, K through 12, in any part of Hamilton County, or any part of your hometown, I'm pretty sure has something that you can do to support students in that effort. I know in particular learning communities, the ones that I represent, which is the Midtown Learning Community, and I have a couple of schools in the Missionary Ridge Learning Community. I represent 8 schools. Well, yeah, 8 schools, 7, I think now, because 2 of my schools have combined. but I represent 8 schools, it's 8. And I know several of them have been listed on the priority list for the state of Tennessee, and they're working their way off there in what we call the achievement, the innovation zone. Used to be the I zone, and now we're working them out of there. But there's always needs there. They have a community, we have a community schools coordinator, a community services coordinator that supports those schools. Her name is Melissa Graham. She always has opportunities for individuals to come in and support. I know that there are several principals. This particular school is not in my district, but I know Mrs. Irvin at Archenard Middle, she has a community schools model in her school. She's always welcoming people in to do, to be mentors and provide supports or to be tutors. I know Mr. Williams at Dalewood does that as well. That is a school that I represent. But across the district, people are always open. If you have a level of skills or expertise, they're open to whatever they can do. And because of COVID, it's limited actual physical interaction into the buildings, but it doesn't mean that you can't do a Zoom call or a Google Meets or a Duo or WhatsApp, or it's all kind of ways to get to people now, right? We've discovered every platform, I think, available in the past year to do that. But those are ways that you can do that. And lots of times guidance counselors and college career access advisors have students lists of names of students that have expressed to them that they like a mentor, they need assistance or support with certain things, college applications, applying for their FAFSA. I mean, there's all kinds of experiences that you all have had to get you to this point that you can pour back into and pay it forward with the student. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. And if you don't know that initial entry, I would offer myself to help be that conduit to get you there.
All right. Hi, I'm Frank Brogdon. I'm a history major and I'm from Chattanooga and also a graduate of CSAS. I have a 2-part question for you. And it's, can you speak to the professional setbacks you have encountered thus far? And how have these setbacks informed how you inspire young women in Chattanooga?
Okay, so yeah. And it's so funny that a lot of you keep saying that you're secondary education majors and history majors. My favorite teacher, just as a side note, but my favorite teacher in school was Mr. Everett Carrell. They called him Skip Carrell, and he was our social science history teacher. We loved Mr. Carrell, but he was such an inspiration to me. And really probably my political background. He always made sure that we were informed about what was going on in our government and in American politics. So that's just a side note, but I really have a great foundation for a great love for teachers, and especially those that teach history, because that meant a lot to me growing up. Now, as it relates to setbacks, so I always tell people all the time, all of my mentors, my mentees, my nieces, cousins, that sort of thing. So I am like a triple threat. That's what I say, right? People that look like me, women that look like me, women that have the background that look like me, we are a triple threat. So not only are we a woman, that's a threat, but I'm Black. That's an intimidation factor for some people. And I'm educated. Whoa. So that's like C4 bomb explosion, right? In some areas. So oftentimes, and for me, and anybody that knows me and has known me all my life, I am very vocal. Like I used to get in trouble for my mouth, and now I have like youth directors and stuff that say, I knew that mouth was going to take you somewhere. But I'm very opinionated and vocal. So oftentimes that's not, that's frowned upon, right? And so for me, in speaking my mind or speaking what I believe is my truth or the truth of the situation that I'm advocating for, passionate for, I believe often has been a setback for me, especially in a town such as my hometown here in Chattanooga. I mean, we've come a long way. We're known as the best mid-sized city in the South. We're known as a scenic city. All these great accolades, gig city, all of that. But we often are a city that's still a tale of two cities. We are a very classist city. Social class is a big factor here in Chattanooga. And so when you get to looking at people like myself or women that look like me, that are educated and outspoken or have a passion or drive, that often is an intimidation factor for people that do not look like me. And so those are often setbacks, and they don't necessarily make it. It's not necessarily, I should say, overt. A lot of times they're covert setbacks, right? And so I'll give you one quick example because I have several, but I'll give you this one quick example because I believe it's the most profound. I remember it was shortly after I was elected to the school board in 2014. I was working in a position and it just was not, I wanted the position because I wanted to have an advancement, career advancement. So I went into like a directorship position. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. So I left from working as a social worker case manager in a hospital and I went over into the private sector in a nursing homes cooperation. I was social services director and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then I got there and realized, yeah, this is not what I want to do. And I hated it. I literally would cry some days. Like I just did not like it. I ended up quitting my job shortly after I was elected to the school board. And so I needed a job, right? So, I mean, I was living off my savings. I was on the school board, but I was not fully gainfully employed. And I remember applying for positions. And at this point, this is 2014. So I'm 9 years in my career as a master's level social worker. And I had an array of experience. And so I remember applying for jobs and interviewing for jobs and being told by even people that I knew that had been on the interview panel that I did a good job, but I just didn't get that job. And then when I found out that they had filled the position with someone else and I realized their credentials, I was just kind of like, so why didn't I get that job? Like, I know I was more qualified than them, right? And so I kept going through that for a while. And at that time, my husband was then my boyfriend. And I remember having the conversation with him one day where I looked at him and I said, you know what? I think I've been blackballed. And if you all know what that means, it's kind of like, just kind of been alienated, right? And so he was like, why would you say that? And I was like, you're not going to tell me that I'm not qualified for these jobs. Like, you're just not. I have a master's degree. I have this amount of experience. I've done these things. I have been blackballed. And he asked me, why did I think that again? And I said, because I am a elected official in Hamilton County and I'm a Black woman that's vocal. And he was like, okay. I mean, he couldn't go against that. I mean, he's born and raised here too, so he couldn't go against that. I remember having the conversation with my father, who had historically, I mean, daddy was a history buff here in Chattanooga. He himself here, and so he's born and raised here. He's seen a lot, experienced a lot here, and so he could concur with me as well. And the amazing thing about that was that went on for some months. Like, I couldn't find a job for some months. And that was a setback. That could have been a setback. And it was at that time a setback for me. But I was able to then I was able to get a job. I went back to the hospital system, the health system where I was working before. They welcomed me with open arms, figured out a position for me. I went temporary, part-time. And then after that, a full-time position opened up and I went there. And from then on, I worked there, and then I was presented with an amazing opportunity that I applied for, and into the current position that I'm in now with the city, where I'm serving in a fellowship for the J.B. Pritzker Foundation, the Pritzker Family Foundation out of Chicago, and I'm one of 13 in an inaugural cohort to be one of the fellows, right? And the funny thing is that when I received the fellowship position and got the job with the city, I was introduced to some leaders, community leaders, because of my role for a coalition here in the city. And I remember being introduced to them, and they didn't know it was me, but I remember going into the meeting that day and they're like, hi, Karitsa, and everybody speaking, hey, how you doing? They thought I was there for school board. They didn't realize I was there for the fellowship. And I remember when they got ready to acknowledge, they said, we want to acknowledge our new Pritzker Fellow for the city of Chattanooga. And when they said my name, several of the people that were in that room were people that had denied me those positions. And so when they said my name and said that I was the fellow, my grandma used to have a saying, like, you could have bought them for a penny. Like, the expressions on their faces were like, she's the fellow. And for me, it was like, I wasn't good enough to do your job, but God blessed me with something bigger. So it's kind of like that setback was a setup for a come up for me. So I just realized it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't supposed to be working for them or in their particular agency or foundation. There was something greater for me. But that was a tremendous setback for me. And it was very discouraging because I just could not believe that in 2014, 2015, that we were still dealing with that when we are supposed to be this city that's progressive and coming together and not everything that we are. They say, we love to say we're not everything that we really are. We still have work to do. And so that's a major setback that I feel like for me inspired me to push forward. And so I use that example a lot when I'm talking to young women, to inspire them to not be discouraged, but to keep pushing, to stay encouraged. And it's hard to do when you're in the moment. But for me, it's been my experience that when you continue to persevere and be persistent, there's a quote that says, "Nevertheless, she persisted." When you continue to be persistent, anything, I believe, spiritually for me, anything that's a setback is a setup for a come up. That's just what I believe. And so, yeah, that's what I tell young women all the time. Don't be discouraged about a setback, because it's just making room for something greater.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Hello, I'm Kirsten Lane. I'm a history major as well. And my question is, how have your experiences as a social worker translated into your work as on the school board?
It's everything that I do, Kirsten. It's everything that I do. People love to say, "Oh yeah, that's right, you're a politician," and I'm quick to tell them I'm not a politician. I am not. I despise the name. I despise the term politician. Right? Everything about that just seems like murky and just bad. I'm an elected official, and the best thing for me being on the school board is that, in the role of being an elected official for the Board of Education, is that I get to be an advocate for kids. And as a social worker, when you look at all the roles that we have, as it relates to being a social worker, to me, advocacy is your most important role. Like you're to advocate for whatever population you're servicing, be it children, elders, whatever macro, micro, meso levels, whatever level you're at. Your main position for me, as a social worker, I believe, is to advocate. And so I get to advocate for 45,000 plus students all the time. I left a meeting last night advocating just for somebody cleaning their building right. And so I get to advocate for kids, and I get to be their voice when they're not able to be their voice. I get to be the voice for parents when parents are not able to be their own voices. I get to sit at a lot of tables that the children and the parents and the teachers and the staff and the administration that I represent never get to sit at, and I get to be their advocate. But the most important part of being able to be their advocate is that I'm able to, let's go over and talk to them and say, let's talk about communication, right? So that's a role as a social worker. I communicate with them so that when I'm sitting at these tables, I'm able to speak for them because I know this is what they want. And another role as a social worker is to be a broker, right? I get to broker a lot of deals on behalf of the populations that I advocate for. And so it just works out. I get to do resource management because I'm always looking for ways that I can help the schools that I represent, that I can support the schools that I represent. So I have to be able to build relationships with community partners to be able to get certain things in buildings, and then just to show the need, right? Because a lot of times people don't think there's a need, but I get to be that voice and say, hey, there's a need. So a lot of things that I do in my experience as a social worker, I get to be in those roles. Most importantly for me, the bulk of my social work experience has been in pediatric health, maternal health, and I've worked as a pediatric social worker. I've worked as a mother-baby, labor and delivery social worker, and I've worked in the NICU, right? And so I've been able to work with babies from in utero all the way to they graduate from high school. And so that experience for me has allotted me, I feel like, a lot of expertise and intelligence and intellect to be able to advocate for certain things, or to be able to talk about or share insights about certain things when we're talking about certain things on the board, especially when COVID came up. I mean, my whole background is medical health, right? Physical health. And so I was able to say, hey, these are some things that I know. In anything we do, especially social emotional health that we talk about with kids, as a social worker, I mean, that's my niche. That's what I've done for years. And so I'm able to advocate on those levels, and to be able to share insight that some of my board peers just don't have the insight to do. And I'm able to open and enlighten them on those things. And so my role as a social worker and my role on the school board really go hand in hand. I'm just a social worker on the school board. That's how I look at it. I just get to be a social worker on the school board.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Aubrey Hollingsworth. I'm a secondary education with a focus in history major. And my question is that, and we read that you live by the quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. So I was just kind of wondering, like, what changes are you hoping that you can help make in Chattanooga?
Okay, so yeah, that is my favorite quote. It's from Gandhi, actually. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And my biggest desire for change here in the city of Chattanooga is that we are able to change the upward mobility of the residents in the city of Chattanooga, right? And what that means is that everybody has an opportunity to rise. Have y'all, and I'm pretty sure you all have seen this, but you've seen the picture where you have the kids and they're standing on like these steps, and there's like a baseball field and there's a gate, and they're talking about equality versus equity versus just full inclusion, that sort of thing. For me, I don't want to talk about equality because I just don't want to talk about that. I would prefer to talk about equity or just full access and inclusion. And so for me in the city of Chattanooga, while we are striving to get there and be more progressive, we have a ways to go with that. And I think both our city government and our county government have a ways to go with it. Oftentimes I feel like the city government is moving faster than the county government, but hey, that's the joy of having two governmental bodies, right? Instead of a metro system. But I would like to, my biggest desire is to work to change the upward mobility for people here in Chattanooga that live here. And in doing that, you change the trajectory of lives for everyone, because we know that when people are able to thrive and have jobs and adequate income and sustainable income, that they're able to buy homes and they're able to buy cars and they're able to provide for their children. And then that, when you're able to increase in those efforts, then you decrease in areas such as theft and robberies and crime, because poverty begets crime, right? So if you're able to change the level of poverty that you have, and you're able to change the access to economic mobility that your residents have, then you're able to then decrease the things that make living in Chattanooga or any other city or town bad things or challenges. And so that is the biggest change that I would like to see. On top of that is what I'm doing now in working to increase educational equity. And that is not just with race, creed, and color, but that's also in access, that's also in provision, that's also in buildings, that's also in academic situations. And so that's my second biggest change that I want to continue to work on. And I'm very, very passionate about is educational equity. I just believe in that. I believe that you cannot expect for a community to grow without giving children the equitable access to public education that they deserve. I don't think it should be a competition between private and public schools. I think it should be that you have options for education, but I believe that public education should be at a standard to which there's no need for competition, because public education is funded with public dollars. It's taxpayers that pay into that, and it's public education is that is best for the commons, I believe. And so I'm a big proponent on doing what is best for the commons. And when you do what is right for the commons and what's best for the commons, then everybody else benefits. Like, you don't have to worry about it. Everybody else benefits. But we have to really work on decreasing and eliminating the silos that we have here in Hamilton County and in Chattanooga, where people just work in pockets and advocate for pockets of communities. You have to just do what is right for people. And when you do what is right for people, everyone benefits.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really liked what you had to say.
Thank you for your question.
Hello, I'm Maggie Stiegel. I've got the next question here, and I'm from Chattanooga as well, and I'm a history major. And my question is, how has your religion shaped your view on how to help with tough situations when it comes to mass education and even in your work as a social worker?
Yeah, so I am a Christian, okay? I'm just gonna go ahead and put that out there. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus Christ, and that's just my foundation. That's what I believe, that's what I know, and it holds fast in truth for me. And I will say that it is a very, if not the most integral part of my life. I oftentimes, in everything that I do every day, I always think about in the Bible when Jesus talks about the things that you do to the least of them, you do to me. So in my actions to people, I think about that. How am I treating the least of them? And I also, in pivoting from that, I think about, I remind myself every day that, but by the grace of God, I could be in certain experiences, right? So I believe that I am blessed, and I live a lot on the grace and mercy of God because I am not perfect and never will proclaim to be, but I do strive every day to be able to live a life that is Christ-like and that is exemplary of a Christian life. But it is in everything that I do, I try to think about, am I living and being an example of what I proclaim to be as a Christian? But I also think about a lot of the stories in the Bible and scriptures where it teaches you how to treat people and how you should handle situations and how you should do things. And a lot of those are my anchors. And a lot of times when I go into situations where I may not have the support that I need, or I may not, I may be walking into situations that could be like furnaces, right? Fiery furnaces. I don't know what I'm about to go in and deal with. I'm very prayerful. I pray a lot. And I do seek wisdom from God on certain things. I try not to act in my own interest, but to make sure that I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do as a Christian. And I just think that it affects everything that I do, because I believe that when you have the heart of Christ and you love with the love of Christ, then you're able to give and support and be whatever you need to be for people to help elevate them and to make them better people.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. So I think now it's time. Aubrey, I see you just, I think it's a clapping. We're going to take a quick break. Karitsa, give you a chance to drink some water or walk around. And that's true for everybody. You want to stretch the legs a little bit. And take a minute about, we'll say 3 or so. We're getting close to the time is moving. You guys have great questions and also great answers. So we'll take about 3 and see how you're doing. Karitsa, I'll check in with you, see how you're doing. In the meantime, I have a couple of things I just want to make you all aware of from RISE's end, and also from the history department's end, about stuff we have coming up soon. Things I think you folks might be interested in, and I hope you'll join us on. So one of those is something with the history department. So we have a walking tour series. And that next one is coming up on, I believe, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe that one's on the 27th. And these that we're talking about are specifically for the UTC community. So Shane, who's the executive director at RISE, has been mentioned before. He leads these tours. It looks at the Big Nine, MLK area, and talks about what buildings are there and what history are they attached to, what's missing, who used to live in building A and who used to work in building B. They're very illuminating and give a great sense of the history of Chattanooga. So I hope you all will take the chance. We'll be doing a couple more. So if you all have the time and if there are spots available, we're still doing distance, of course, taking the necessary precautions. Shane can project his voice well, and I think you'll have some sort of device to project that as well. Some other stuff that we have going on this Thursday. This is one of the favorite things that we've been doing surrounding mental wellness and mental health. So we have a partner named Jay, who is a licensed mental health professional. She's been doing sessions for us talking about mental health and mental wellness. So this one coming up Thursday is Thursday at 6:15 on Zoom. It's free. It's open to everyone, all identities, all walks of life. You find that information on our Facebook event page and also on our Instagram, RISE Chattanooga. But the quick sessions where Jay just kind of walks us through, helpful tools and hints. It's still so much craziness going on, and I know you all as students and teachers and other folks that are in this chat, there are a lot of challenges, and it's, even if there aren't challenges, it's just important to make sure that we're keeping our minds right. So that's again on Thursday at 6:15. I hope y'all join us for that. Additionally, just some stuff we always have going on. As I said before, school board member Mosley Jones is one of our podcast hosts, and we have a number of podcasts that we offer, specifically telling the stories, hearing the voices of creatives of color in the Chattanooga area. So check that out. And then similarly, we also have a magazine that's called Coco Magazine. And it does a similar thing, but in text. So highlighting local businesses, local organizations, having people's articles, stories photographs, things like that. So all things coming up soon or always going on. So I hope you'll engage with us there. And most pressing, again, is that event on Thursday. I really hope you all. It's very very illuminating. And really very life giving to be able to get some of these tools just to be able to meter some of that stress or anxiety or whatever else might be sneaking up on you as we continue to try to navigate some unusual waters. That being said, that's all I have. Obviously, if you all want to get in touch with me, I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free if you have any questions, or visit the RISE website at risechat.org.
Thank you, Woodson. And just one quick announcement for an upcoming talk that you might be interested in. Dr. Tiffany Floral will be speaking on Afro-Germany and Audre Lorde's inspiration. So for those of you who are interested in those conversations, I'll put an info link here in the chat shortly. And I think we're ready to resume our interview. I know the students are curious a little bit to learn more about Karitsa's politics and sort of how she envisions politics and how she defines leadership. So I invite the students to chime in on that topic.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Romani, and I'm a psych major and a history minor. My question for you today is, as the first African-American female and the youngest member to be elected to the Hamilton County School Board, what oppositions did you face?
So I'm the first African-American elected to my district. I'm not the first African-American woman elected to the board. The first African-American woman was Deborah Matthews. She's no longer with us physically. She passed away in 2008, I believe. But she was the very first African-American woman elected to the board. But like I said, I am the first elected to represent District 5. And at the time of my election, I was 33 years old, and I was the youngest ever elected to serve on the board at that time as well. Since then, we have had two other board members to come along, and they were younger than me at their time of election. So, hence that. But let me see, obstacle wise or opposition did I face? So when I ran for school board in 2014, it was for an open seat. The current school board member at that time was Jeffrey Wilson for District 5, and he was no longer wanting to occupy that seat. And so it was an open seat. And I ran in a race with, it was 7 of us, 6 other individuals. So I ran in a race with 7 other individuals. And that was quite an experience because there was a candidate that was running along with me, alongside me for the seat, that kind of made it about he and I, right? So it's kind of like he just kind of eliminated the other 4 people, 5 people at that time. Just kind of like he just, everything was like I was the only candidate like in the race with him. And it was quite an experience. And because I don't have this tumultuous background, it wasn't like he was able to dig up a lot of dirt on me or anything. I mean, I didn't have any of that to dig up on. So there were allegations made or accusations made for certain things, or he would point out certain things about me or certain beliefs that I had in efforts to, I guess, negate my experience or negate my qualities or qualifications for the position. I remember when I first ran for school board, I was not, biologically, I had no children, right? But I also was not married at that time either. And so I had always made this promise to myself that I wouldn't have children until I was married. But that was a big thing. Like he kept bringing it up. Shouldn't even have kids. Shouldn't even have kids. And I'm like, but do you have to have kids to advocate and represent kids? Like you don't. I mean, that's not a qualifying factor here, right? But there was just a lot of things that came up. And so it was quite contentious at times. But once again, I tried really hard not to fall victim to those things. My family and friends were very protective of me, and they would respond and they would say things. My supporters would respond and say things. But I tried very hard not to do that. And that was hard. That was hard because, like I told you, I'm very vocal, right? And I'm an only child and I'm the baby. So a lot of times it's me or you. But I was really, I worked really hard not to fall into that. But those were some of the oppositions that I faced. Of course, when I got to the board, it was just myself and at that time, Mr. George Ricks. We were the only two persons of color on the board. At that time, Mr. Ricks rolled off the board about 2 years later, which left me as the only person of color on that board at the time. And technically, I am still the only person of color per se. I'm the only African American on the board. We have Marco Perez is now on the board, so he does represent the Latino Hispanic population. But out of 9 members, you have just the 2 of us, right? So oftentimes, without purposely doing so, there's opposition because they just don't understand that world. My other peers, oftentimes, as much as they may try to, they just cannot understand that world. And that comes up a lot when we have equity discussions or what are barriers to success for educators or teachers of color. They just don't know, right? Because you can't know what you don't know or what you haven't experienced. And a lot of times you get opposition from those kinds of things as well. I never really had any opposition about my age. I would have some people sometimes say, well, you're the baby of the group, or, I've had board members throw off like, well, I'm not as young as Miss Karitsa. You hear those kinds of things. And I'm thinking, I'm not as old as you either. But at the same time, age comes with wisdom. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I've never really had any type of opposition in that aspect. I just try really hard and work really hard to make sure that I'm making informed statements, that I'm educated about what I know. And then I feel like at that point, you can't really question me as a Black woman or as a young person because what I'm making is supported by actual data and research and statistics.
So I realized earlier I did not introduce my major to you. I'm a history and psychology major. And one of the biggest things for me growing up here is being a part of a community that is a minority, not just in being Black, but also being queer and like trans. A lot of times my question for not only just politicians, but other like form of leadership is, in what way do you think your work addresses the challenges that the homeless, lower income, the LGBT community, or trans men or women encounter?
So going back to what I said earlier, I try to do what is right for people. I am a lover of people. I love you for who you are. I advocate for you for who you are. It is not for me to judge or make decisions based off of how I feel about your life decision, right? Everyone has free will. Everyone has freedom of choice. People are people. Nobody discriminates upon me or makes decisions about me because of my choices for lifestyle, right? I don't have the right to do that for anyone else. I'm not privy to do that. I don't care. No, I feel like no one is privy to do that. I don't care if you agree with it or you disagree with it. You're not privy to judge people because everybody has something that can be judged on. This is just point blank a period. None of us are perfect. So every day, one of us has done something, or all of us have done something that somebody may feel like they can have an opinion about or be judgmental about. And that's not fair because we all do things. But I am a respecter of people and their life choices. And I love all people. I do. I don't like the fact that we have a homeless population. I just drove down off of 11th Street the other day, and I looked over next to through to the city of Chattanooga's Wellness Center, right? And Tent City, for lack of better terms, is back. They tried to move it, alleviate it, whatever. It's back. It's right there. It's there. It's there. And even when they tried to eliminate it, they just moved locations. They moved out off of Gun Barrel behind Home Depot. Homeless people, they're a population that needs service. And yes, sometimes that's by choice that people are homeless. And sometimes it's not by choice, but I think that we do need to have, or let me say this. We have services available. I believe that we need to expand availability of services if we want to be this progressive city that we have. As it relates to lower income citizens, I just talked about that, right, with the whole poverty situation and over mobility and the blight in certain neighborhoods. I think that aesthetics are everything. I think the opportunity is everything, and you have to improve certain situations. So we hear a lot about the opportunity zone, and you get governmental fundings and supports for things in the opportunity zone. But then that, to me, in my opinion, that money was placed in areas that were already gentrified or updated or had been renovated, instead of taking them to areas of town where you could have changed the visual blight of homes, and you could have helped to improve the neighborhoods from being social deserts, financial deserts, food deserts, educational deserts, and providing opportunity in those areas that to me are still forgotten. And so there's work to do there. As it relates to the LGBTQ plus community, once again, I love all people, and I have all kind of people in my village, in my circle, okay? And I'm defensive of all of them. All of them. All of them, period. Okay? Family, friends, colleagues. I don't like for people to talk about that. Your lifestyle choice is your lifestyle choice. Nobody dislikes me because I'm heterosexual, right? So I don't have the right to dislike someone else because I don't live in your house with you. That's not my business. Okay? It's not my business. But I am a supporter of, once again, of people. And so that's how I feel about that. And I believe that you love people and you judge not unless you be judged, because we all have things that we can be judged on.
Oh, no, that was beautiful, and I love your answer. It's something that always carries my mind, because I feel like we're missing that focus here in Chattanooga, and we need to work on a way to focus on different communities instead of the same ones.
Right.
Hello, my name's Summer Calhoun. I am a history major and an African history minor. And my question is, how have educational inequality, political oppression, and capitalism created socioeconomic barriers in Chattanooga?
Oh, child, you got a week. That's a loaded question. I don't think we have enough time. Like, that's a loaded question.
Maybe focus more on the capitalism, if you don't
know. So all of that has affected the let's say this. All of that has affected the socioeconomic background here in Chattanooga, right? I talked about that earlier with us being a classist city. It is what it is, and I'm always ready to debate that with people, because I've had some people say, you think so? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't know if you all have noticed or if you're old enough to realize this, but here in Chattanooga, my friends and I, we have a joke that people determine your status by the high school you graduated from, not by the university that you graduated from, and not by your job. But if you graduated from a Hickson or a Brainerd versus a GPS and a Baylor, and you're like, so we are a classist thing, and a lot of that determines that. I grew up early on hearing about how the people on the mountain ran the valley, right? Historically, there are some names that resonate within the city of Chattanooga and in Hamilton County that are known for being the decision makers for our city. It is what it is. And so all of that to me dictates what that looks like. When you think about, I heard a stat recently, and this is not the exact stat, but it talked about how when you look at rankings for cities, that how Lookout Mountain is like in the top 10, and then, communities, I should say. Lookout Mountain is like in the top 10 across the country. And then you could look at Alton Park, and it's like number 67, and they're like less than 7 minutes driving distance. I mean, you have to go through Alton Park to get up the mountain. Like, so those are things that just that help to shape, I feel like, the barriers in Chattanooga. When you look at, when you talk about political oppression, so yeah, I'm African American and I'm elected. I am one of 6 Black elected officials in Hamilton County. One of 7 people of color elected in Hamilton County. It's 2021. Y'all can figure that out. Y'all history majors. It's 2021. Why is that still the situation, right? And so there's political oppression there. You talk about, you have certain people that are in positions that are elected employees, right? You have mayors, you have sheriffs, you have certain people that are tax assessors. You have certain people that are elected employees. And look at what we deal with. So there's a lot to go there. And if you just, yeah, if you could just really get around some of the elders that I had, you would be able to find a lot of insight with that. But there are educational inequalities. We used to have a city and a county system. There was a referendum back in 92 or 93, I believe it was. And the city went out of the education business. The people, the citizens of the city of Chattanooga voted to go out of the education business. Hence, every school, because of the city of Chattanooga sitting in Hamilton County, became Hamilton County schools. Well, there's always been a city and a county kind of, it's a them and a they. I mean, it's always been that kind of a situation. And I believe even in the merger, there never was a true consolidation. And you can tell that when you look at some of our buildings, when you look at some of the facilities, when you look at the bus system. So like back in the day, the city had their own bus system, the county had their own bus system, but they use a lot of contract drivers. Well, now, even though we're a merged system, we have a bus system that we contract with that's a paid system, first student, used to be Durham. And then now we still have contract drivers. I mean, to me, everybody should be getting on the same kind of bus, right? So you deal with those kinds of things, and those are educational, I don't want to say inequalities, I say they're inequities. But you look at provisions that are made in buildings, when you look at resources that are in buildings, there are some buildings that have just one teacher of color in that building, right? It's not just one student of color, but there's one teacher of color in some school buildings, and we have to work on that. We have a hard time. We talked about this last night in agenda session. We have a hard time recruiting and retaining teachers of color and minority teachers because I don't feel like because of Hamilton County. I mean, we have some work to do there as Hamilton County school system, but I feel like a lot of times we get young minority teachers that move here to Chattanooga because of the picture that's painted for them. And then they get here and they see the reality and they're like, deuces, I'm out of here. This is not what I thought it was. This is not the melting pot that you portrayed it to be. And they're gone, right? Because there's so many other cities that border us that they can go to and really truly get that experience. So once again, we are a work in progress here in Chattanooga and in Hamilton County, but all of those have created socioeconomic barriers here in the city. And we do have a lot of work to do. I think as our governmental bodies and entities change with new elected officials, with more progressive mindsets, that we are continuing to get there. But just like it took a long time to create it, it's not going to happen overnight to alleviate it. But we have to keep working and pressing toward that.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Hi there, my name is Jacqueline. I'm a communications major with a minor in interior architecture, and I'm from Clarksville, Tennessee. And I have two questions for you today. What are some of the most critical issues that children that are enrolled in Hamilton County schools confront today? And how could the community help push for better resources for the children?
Ooh, so critical issues, facilities are critical issues. Building facilities are critical issues. And as we continue to work on our Blueprint 2030 plan, we're trying to come up with it. Well, we're working toward a 10-year long range plan for that, which is why we did that big facility study about a year ago that there was so much discussion about, is because as we try to work toward, like, the facility is like big as a phone book, y'all. If you were able to see it, like those issues are really big. But as we continue to improve those and even build new buildings, we're trying very hard in building new buildings to not let those buildings and facilities lack anything that's necessary for academic success and student success in those areas. But facilities is a big issue. Educational equity is an issue. Making sure that we're able to expose all children to the same types of educational opportunities. That's why in most high schools, well, pretty much every high school has a Future Ready Institute, because you can't put a Future Ready Institute in one school and not put it in another school, right? And that's why those opportunities are opened for if you attend a school but you want to go to a Future Ready Institute in another building, that you're able to apply for that Future Ready Institute. We don't limit you to just what's in your building. Making sure that advanced placement courses are in every high school, making sure that you have literacy coaches and math coaches in every elementary school. We're still working toward this, but I know that we are working toward getting arts in every elementary school. There's not arts in every elementary school. That is a barrier, right? That's the issue that we face, that they need to be able to have access to. But I would say, for me, in my opinion, the most critical issues are facilities, making sure they're in safe, healthy facilities that are ADA compliant, that are safe from people who like to make bad choices when it comes to children. We don't want a Sandy Hook situation or a Columbine or anything like that going on here. So we want to make sure our buildings are safe. But then also we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that our children are having equitable educational experiences and being prepared for that next level of life, whatever that looks like for them, right? Which is why we went back to making sure that students graduate with just state of Tennessee traditional diploma. We had worked prior to that. I know when I graduated from high school in '99, and before that, it was more of a college preparation diploma, advanced kind of diploma track that we were going towards. So there was not as much exposure to like trade and tech kind of programs, but we've changed that and we've alleviated that, because we do know that all children are not going to college, right? But it doesn't mean that they cannot be college and career prepared, because career can be an array of things, military, voc, tech, that sort of thing. So those are the two things that I feel like are the most critical issues that we're making sure that we're addressing those needs.
Thank you.
We've got two more questions that students wanted to ask. Blake, I know you were burning to ask your question.
Hi, Miss Mosley. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, again, as another history major, obviously this is of particular interest to me, but how do you feel about the current Hamilton County curricula as it addresses issues of racial oppression, violence in American history? And I would like to add to that, how do you feel it handles Black success and achievement as well, as far as discussing that in American history?
You said how it addresses Black success and achievement. Is that what you said?
Yes, in addition to racial oppression and violence in American history.
So we are a work in progress. We are a work in progress with that. I think we're better than we were when I first got to the board, but I know recently, within the last year, we had a situation where there was a book that was selected from a book list at Signal Mountain. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this. And then the book was pulled because of the background of the book, when it really turned out to seem more that it really wasn't about the book. It was really about the fact that it was about Black children. And this is all during the time of what is The Hate U Give had come out. The movie The Hate U Give had come out. And The Hate U Give is actually one of the books that was on there, but that wasn't the book that was pulled. I can't even think of the name of it. So we do have books that are offered. We do have things that are, there are some schools that teach African-American history. I know Brainerd has an African-American history course. Some other schools have that as well, but we do have some work to do. I mean, when I was at CSAS in the 90s, we had African-American history coach now Principal Jim Bowles. He was Coach Jim Bowles at that time, but Coach Bowles taught us African-American history. So I know from time to time there's exposure, but as far as it being part of the main curriculum, we do have some work to do with that. And I think as we continue to have the equity talk and talk about what that looks like for educational equity and access, that is a discussion that has to be had, because we have to be able to teach about all cultures, and you have to expose children to all cultures. And we talked about, I mentioned this last night at a board agenda session, when we were talking about actually this same topic, these barriers and the lack of exposure. And for me, I talked about how arts and sciences was like a big melting pot, and it was like a crayon box with all types of colors. And that was my experience, but I know that every child didn't get that experience, but I feel they need that experience, because what I do know is that when I was a kid, and I even color now for stress relief, I just don't color with a yellow crayon. I use all the colors in the crayon box. And that's the way the world is. Everybody in the world plays an integral part in how we proceed forth and we progress forward. And so you can't just limit history or educational access or opportunities or lessons to just one particular train of history, because that's just not what life is about. And then you get kids that graduate and they're like bombarded or like so stunned, or like the the scales come off of their eyes when they realize that, oh my gosh, this is not what they taught me in school. And it's like they're shell shocked, or they have this big unveiling at like 21 on a college campus or whatever. And I've had this happen. I've had children from both experiences attend like PWIs or vice versa, HBCUs, and they're like, oh my God, what happened? Where these people come from? Why do they think like this? And you're like, because this is the real world. And this is what happens in the real world. And so I do think that we have a lot of work to do there. But when those things come up from when we're discussing them curriculum wise and there's a vote or something that comes up, I will tell you, I feel like with our current board and the past board that I've been on for about the last 4 years, that we are more inept, and we typically those things are passed and voted upon to move forward. Tomorrow night, well, not tomorrow night, Thursday night, we will vote on an educational equity policy. First one in Hamilton County history. So we are moving forward, but it takes time, and it takes people like us that are on the board advocating for those things.
Thank you so much.
I hope I answered your question. Did I?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and these really important questions and your time, Ms.